Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Eric Fraser here. I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time away from your busy life, your busy schedule to participate in this lesson in today's class, where we're going to be focusing on real specific, deliberate habits for developing peak performance. And we're going to get into some granular work in this lesson and all of my classes. I want to encourage everyone to maybe take some notes if you have a journal with you, maybe for future lessons, if you come back, consider doing that so we can keep this very dynamic and active. And I'm going to give some narrative in the beginning and give you some bulleted ideas and some questions to pose to yourself for ongoing work with this so you can take this information and really have an extended learning experience from this. And of course, we'll have some Q&A in the second half of today's presentation. But one of the focal points that I want to bring to you today is to consider the notion about how important habit making is, and to really think about, well, what is a habit and what does the psychological research and the science tell us about habit formation? There seems to be a consensus in the field that it takes about 3 weeks to form a habit. And once you have that 3-week metric in place, you have the stickiness to really keep it going, and the will and the wherewithal, what I like to call grit, right? The stamina for the long-term goal to make those specific habits stick. So today what we'll talk about is how to do that, but also what gets in the way. But before I get into that, I thought I'd share a couple stories with you about some of the habits that I developed over the years and how they came to fruition. And they come from different vantage points. So I thought they would be good illustrators for everyone else in areas of your life where you're working on projects or goals or ambitions and you've succeeded, or maybe you're hitting a couple stumbling blocks along the way, and these experiences will be helpful to hear. So the first one comes from many years ago, and I was participating in what's called crew, the rowing team at a university, and we're paddling along the river. And this was my first sort of experience doing this, after several weeks. And the coach was telling me to hold my hands a certain way on the oar, right? So you have these very long oars, and we had 8 people in what's called the shell, which is the watercraft that you're rowing. It's very narrow, it's very wobbly. So it's actually quite frightening because it's pretty easy to fall into the water with these things. But in any case, I was doing something incorrect with my grip. And just with one of my hands, it was my inner hand. And you can imagine as you're rowing, you would go forward, you would pivot your oar, the oar would go in the water, you would pull back, you finish your stroke, and then you do it over again 1,000 times per day. So what happened was I was not pivoting my left hand correctly. For some reason, it just was not clicking. And I was making the same mistake practice after practice. Maybe it wasn't quite so many. So what happened? So the coach yells for the boat to stop. He drives the launch craft, the little motorboat that goes alongside while he's giving his coaching instructions, pulls up to me, pulls out a roll of athletic tape, takes the athletic tape and says, "Give me your hand," and puts my hands on the oar, positions my left hand on the oar the way that it should be, which I wasn't doing correctly, and proceeded to tape my left hand to the oar. So he said, "Now, okay, let's get back to the next session." So you can imagine the feelings that I had at that moment. One was enthusiasm, because there was no way I could get it wrong. But the second was absolute terror, because if you think about it, my hand is now attached to this oar. And what happens with these boats is, if your oar gets stuck in the water, it's called catching a crab. It's just a vernacular of the sport. But what really could happen is your oar gets stuck, it gets jammed in the water, it gets lodged down, and you get ejected from the boat. Now, that would be one experience if you could actually let go of the oar and get ejected from the boat, which happens very, very rarely. In my case, not only was I going to get ejected from the boat, but I was going to get ejected from the boat with my hand taped to the oar, which probably wouldn't have broken free, which was also attached to the boat, which would have tipped the entire boat over into the river. So, needless to say, That day, I didn't catch a crab, I didn't get ejected from the boat, and I learned how to row properly using the proper form, and that instilled the habit. Nowadays, with all kinds of imaging and things, we could probably do a scan and see how a new neuronal pathway was formed in that moment to create the experience of that proper habit. And in that case, not just a proper habit, but a positive habit, right? Because there I was able to reach my true performance, and then ultimately through more practice, accomplish and achieve peak performance in that sport over many months and many years in the future. So that's an example of one challenge that takes place with habit formation, and sometimes some of the drastic extremes we need to do, sometimes paradoxical interventions, the polar opposite of what we think, to actually instill a habit and then to allow that habit to take its natural formation. Another story that I want to tell, bringing things a little bit more current, is as a hobby, I engage in mountaineering and rock climbing and things like that. And I decided that I wanted to go out very recently to a summer to Grand Teton. And the preparation for a trip like that is very, very significant. And I had to practice not only the endurance, but also the willpower and the fear management, because when you're exposed at 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 feet, standing on a wall of rock, a lot of you have probably seen the famous film with Alex Honnold free soloing El Capitan, which I'm certainly not comparing myself to, but you can imagine the training and the habit formation that goes into a long-term goal. The point that I'm getting to is, in preparation for that objective, for that experience of peak performance, of mental focus, of clarity, of fear management, many, many, many hours and many years of training went into that, not only on the physical component, but a gradual escalation into from less difficult challenges in mountaineering and rock climbing to much greater ones, where I was able to accomplish that goal, reach the summit, and do so in a way that fear was managed, stress was managed, physical preparation was managed, and I had the positive mindset to be able to enjoy and immerse myself into that experience. So that's an outdoor experience model, but the theme remains the same. The third example I'm going to give is a little bit more of a knowledge-based sort of academic experience, where when I decided to write the book that I wrote for the first time about a year ago, The Psychology of Top Talent, many people approached me that they had shared ideas about writing their first book. And I think most people have some sort of wish or dream or ambition to actually write a book, or maybe it's a paper or a white paper or some kind of professional publication to gain recognition in as a leader in your industry, or simply just for personal reasons, to make a contribution to the field, to share your knowledge and information and participate in the community of collective intelligence that we all live in today. So again, the example is, how did deliberate practice and habit formation fulfill that objective? And it was very simple. It really breaks down, all of these tasks break down into very simple metrics and parameters. And for me, the writing the book component really broke down into very simple behavior. And the behavior was setting up the habit of writing every single week. Not every single day, but every single week. Why did that matter? Because I discovered many, many years ago that if you don't put something on your calendar, there's a much greater probability that it won't happen. Okay, so we all use calendars nowadays. We all have appointment alerts and second alerts and third alerts, right? And if you think about this and reflect on what's on your calendar, or even if you look at it and you take an appraisal and think about the calendared schedule and what you have actually fulfilled and completed versus the things that you have intended to do, even for yourself, let alone work responsibilities, that didn't happen because they were not on your calendar, I predict that you will find a disproportionate degree of balance between objectives completed and objectives not completed. So it's really a very, very simple task. It's much less complicated than one would imagine. Like, how could it just boil down to putting something on your calendar? But my challenge to you is take the test and write down specifically what one of your major goals is right now, right today, right here now, that is not yet completed. And you have to break this down into simple metrics and respond accurately. How are you breaking that down into behaviors that will become habits, and habits that will become actions that become fulfilled and that constantly move your needle towards reaching that specific goal? You know, there's a saying that really speaks to this, and it's a real simple one, and it's, you know, miles make champions. And it applies not just to athletes, but it applies to all of the miles, meaning the time and the effort equals outcomes. And if you use that simple formula, miles make champions, time plus effort equals outcomes, you will have a very simple and useful practical blueprint to achieve your objectives in a persistent and consistent way. Now, before we get into questions and answers, there's an activity that I want to walk through and present it to you in a way that you can take this activity and do some work on it a little bit later on. But a lot of successful people, if not all, have these built-in habits into their life. And I like to break them down into the following categories. What are your morning habits? What are your midday habits? And what are your evening habits? Okay. And what do I mean by that? Well, I want to break it down even further. Okay. And I'm just going to refer to my notes so I get this correct. But the topic number one is wellness. So what are your wellness habits in the morning, during the day, in the evening? The second is nutrition, right? There's an arsenal of books and published research and information about the importance of nutrition. And I'm not promoting any particular diet or fad or trend, just flat out basic nutrition, because nutrition creates the fuel creates the brain stimulation and development, and feeling energized promotes optimism and actions that lead to desired results. Okay, so what are the nutrition routines that you have? Okay, thirdly, attention. Attention is one of the biggest demands these days, with so many distractions taking place. Even attending to this presentation or attending to a meeting that you had an hour before or you're going to have later today. So what are you practicing? What is your habit to practice sustaining attention? How do you practice that in the morning? Do you practice it during the day? How do you reset? How can you practice that in the evenings? And then the last habit that I want to talk about today is learning. What are you doing as a habit to learn something new in the morning, right? To learn something new during the day, and to learn something new in the evening times. Learning, okay, in the concept of the growth mindset, right? That high performers are continuous learners, and continuous learners tend to have this trait of curiosity. But even if you don't feel like you have that trait, you can develop that trait. Be curious. What does it mean to be curious? It means I want to get better at something and I need to learn more about it. And you can develop and nurture that curiosity by feeding it, and feeding it with the kind of information that fulfills that curiosity, gives you tacit information about a particular area of expertise that ultimately is going to elevate you as a knowledge leader. To bring that full circle, then you take that information and you teach it to somebody else. And there again, you're promoting and putting yourself forward as a leader. Now, the closing point on these habits that I'm promoting that you work on, you think about, you reflect, is also to think about some of the obstacles for these habits, right? Because everyone has obstacles. No one is immune from that. And the obstacles that you need to think about are what is getting in the way of nutrition in the morning? What is getting in the way of wellness in the evenings? What is getting in the way of learning during the day or on my morning or evening commute, for example? What is getting in the way of being able to pay attention? What are the distractions? right? So it's not only identifying what you want to do, but it's adopting what I like to call a type of minimalism, okay? What can you minimalize, okay? To sort of coin the word a little bit from minimization, to reduce or eliminate some of the obstacles that are getting in the way of creating your habits. I have a good friend of mine who's been talking about writing a book for many, many years. And I've had this same conversation with him. And the obstacles in his life seem to revolve around time. I don't have enough time. So the solution for something like time is making the time, right? Getting up 15 minutes earlier, going to sleep 15 minutes later, carving out time instead of doing a distracting activity like maybe checking social media, using that 15 minutes for meditation or for mindfulness or for going for a walk or for getting some vitamin D from the sun and being outdoors. All of these things which have been demonstrated in research to improve optimism, to improve happiness, to improve attention, to improve well-being. So it's little simple things. It's not any drastic approach, but I am certain that if you adopt this blueprint and you make some very specific, focused, granular changes, and you put them on your calendar like appointments, just like it's very unlikely that you're going to miss your dental appointment or your annual wellness health checkup appointment or a meeting with your manager or your team. If you put appointments in for these habits that you're trying to create, they will develop the stickiness that you need within that 3-week span, and then you'll be doing it independently. There's certainly plenty more topics that we can, develop into to fine tune and tweak this habit formation. But these are the first steps or steps to fill in what you already have in place to reach your peak performance and to sustain it from there. So at this point, we'll turn into some questions, and I appreciate your feedback and interest.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eric. Hi, everyone. This is Cara with Meditation Live. Thank you so much for joining us today. And yes, as Dr. Eric mentioned, now is the time for Q&A. So if you have questions about what we just discussed, you're welcome to pop those into the chat box or the Q&A box right at the bottom of your screen. You can also raise your hand to be unmuted. And I did put a question for everyone to contemplate into the chat box. I said, what are your goals? How could forming a habit help you to achieve that goal? And Julie shared that her goal this month is to keep a daily workout habit. So if you would like to share, like Julie, what your goal is and how what we talked about, what Dr. Eric talked about, could help you achieve that, you can pop that into the chat box. And Dr. Eric, we do have a question from Samira. I think this relates to what you talked about with obstacles. How can some of us have a positive habit when we don't have family to support us and we're stuck there?
Yep, that's a common phenomenon, right? And you can pivot that into sort of any scenario where you feel like, what I'm hearing is you feel the absence of support. So, the thing to do is get connected with a support person or a support community. Sometimes everyone has down weeks. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll get in touch with somebody and say, hey, let's go out for a run today, just to stay on track. So just to break it down even more than that, one is if you want to build a habit and you don't have support, you don't feel that you have support, number one, you should congratulate and give yourself some compassion for acknowledging that, right? You've identified one of the major obstacles. That's tremendous. Okay, so now the pivot is, okay, where can support be found, right? So depending on what your interests are, or what your goal is, you can start turning to friend support. Okay, you can start turning to various support groups. There's professional groups, there's non-professional groups. A lot of people that I speak with use Meetup, the app, as an opportunity to connect with other like-minded individuals. So regardless of what your preferences are, your habits are, your the routine that you're trying to develop, you can just about connect with any group. So that's another way to do that. You can get involved with an organization, right? Like a yoga studio. You can get involved with this community on Meditation Live and find some support and get some support here. So support is everywhere. The first step is sometimes always the most frightening, but I encourage you to go forward and seek out a new resource of support, even if you don't have family or friends.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Eric. And Samira, hopefully that answered your question. And yes, we are here for you at Meditation Live with our meditation and performance community. And we do have a question from Anonymous. Eric, I get that it takes 3 weeks to form a habit, but I struggle with developing a habit, and then because of work or travel, I lose it, and it's tough to get started again. Definitely, I've definitely experienced that. What can we do about that, Dr. Eric?
Yep, great. So again, this is common. A lot of people travel. Everybody works, to a lesser or greater degree. So I'm gonna go back to the basics and kind of drill it home. Like, you really have to take that behavioral action of putting it on your calendar. I promise you, it makes all the difference, because it's really about accountability. So when you don't put it on your calendar, it's almost as if it's still in your mind, it's still in your head, like, okay, I'm gonna work out today, or I'm gonna journal today, or I'm gonna go to a yoga class today, right? And your mind is able to talk you out of it with all kinds of excuses and reasons. You don't have time, you're busy, you have to travel, you're going to be late for this, you name it. You can make up any excuse you want. That's what the mind does. It just continues talking all the time. So you really have to put it on your calendar. And I like to map calendars out at least once on a monthly basis. So yes, 3 weeks is important for the stickiness, but if you have a month, you can print it out, you can put it in different places. So a lot of this is like, putting up some physical props. So it's not just on your screen. There's been times where I've put it on the refrigerator, or you can put it on your office desk, or put it on both. So that gives credence to the accountability piece. If you travel, same thing, right? So you have to think about your travel schedule, your time zone schedule, where you're going to be staying, just to keep it simple in terms of an example. If you're concerned about not being able to work out or go to a yoga class or something of that nature because you're traveling, you can plan for that. So if you're traveling cross country or to a different time zone, when you're picking your hotel, or if your hotel doesn't have those resources, find one in the area, book the appointment ahead of time, put your appointment on your calendar, and the chances are much greater, much greater, that you will actually fulfill that. So that's how you manage the obstacles, the distractions, the interruptions. If nutrition is part of this, traveling and nutrition are really difficult. So again, it takes more planning, making a list. So maybe instead of going on your calendar, it becomes a to-do reminder, right? To plan and to pack certain nutritious foods while you're traveling. So you have what's better for you at the airport, or while you're in the plane, or when you're getting off the plane. So you're hydrated properly. Little basic things that can make all the difference to maintain that consistency across time and distance.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Eric. And Vina asks, how can I stop procrastinating?
Yeah, so procrastination is kind of like circular reasoning, right? It's like saying, how can I get off the treadmill? You just have to get off. You have to take action. If you're struggling with that, one suggestion that I have is find, like the buddy system with swimming, find a buddy, right? And someone that you trust, someone that you want to share your goal with, whatever you're procrastinating on, and say, look, tomorrow I want to start fill in the blank, okay? Give me a call tomorrow and ask me if I did this, or give me a call before I'm supposed to do this, right? So you have some accountability to somebody that's going to encourage you and nurture you and remind you and be supportive so that you fulfill it. Breaking the ice on that first day is really, really helpful, because now you've got momentum. It's a lot easier to go from day 1 to day 2 than it is from 0 to 1. Yes, performance buddy, somebody wrote. Exactly. And this goes, you could use this in any metric. It could be with the nutrition. It could be with the attention. It could be with a wellness activity. It could be with continuous learning, and doing it with somebody else makes it all that much more fun, right? So this shouldn't just be work. This should be fun. You should be excited about, finding ways to tap into your potential and reaching it And sharing that with someone, sharing that journey with someone is encouraging. And chances are they're either doing the same thing or they're seeking to do the same thing. So if you meet up once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month with one of your performance buddies, and you say, hey, what's the latest nutritional drink that that you've switched into? Or hey, what kind of workouts are you doing? Or hey, what podcast are you listening to? Or what book are you reading? Or what Netflix documentary have you learned something new about? You're going to have an accountability performance buddy, and this is going to help you accomplish your goals.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Eric. And Kelsey, thank you for sharing. Kelsey's goal is to make healthier choices when it comes to nutrition and to do something active every day outside of a daily workout, such as taking longer walks with her dog, bike riding, etc.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to also point out, from Kelsey's comment that you have to start somewhere, and it doesn't matter where. It's just starting. So if it's 1 minute of meditation, if it's 5 minutes of walking, if it's 10 minutes of a podcast instead of satellite radio, on your commute, regardless of what it is, you have to start somewhere. And then the next week or the next month, you can just move it up a little bit more until it fits into the spot that you feel is the right balance for you. So you can go from 5 to 10 minutes, 10 to 15, and move along at your own pace until you feel like you're truly reaching your potential.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, we do have a question. What do you suggest? What do you suggest for us to focus and be present to reach our goals?
Yeah. So if you're not sure what your goals are, I think it's really helpful to give yourself some distraction-free space. And that can be whatever that means to you. For me, that's meditation. For me, that's going out for walks or hikes in the woods, being outdoors, turning off my phone, right? And having that space just to reflect, okay? And then come back, and I strongly suggest you journal out your ideas. Just let it flow, free flow, write your ideas down, okay? And that will give you focus, right? Because you're not being distracted. So that's helping you attend to really like your inner purpose, if you will, okay? Or what's pulling at you. I like to ask the question, and maybe you can ask this to yourselves as a follow-up to this. What's keeping you up at night? What do you think about the next morning, right? Not literally keeping you up at night, but what's on your mind, okay? And when you can identify specifically what that is, now you have clarity. Now you have focus. And now you have a way to continue to explore that and understand how you can create habits to solve that, right? Or how to create the solution around that, or how to remove the obstacle that's in the way of what you really want, what your dreams are.
Wonderful. Thank you. And everyone, I know we're getting to about the half-hour mark, so if you do need to go, thank you so much for joining us today. Otherwise, we do have a few more questions and comments that I would love to get to. Ryan commented that his goal is to engage my 5-year-old more in more physical activity. Wonderful. Thank you, Ryan. And a question from Pippi. I'm pretty good at attending to my professional life. My relationship seems to be a compromise. Is balance key?
I think you answered your own question, right? Look, relationships are complex and tricky, to say the least, and we could spend a whole class on that, and maybe we will. But the way I'm gonna answer this is, your comment is very, very helpful and very insightful. Why? Because you're noticing. Okay, so another action, another behavior that you can do through this lesson and through the others, okay, is noticing. Noticing means observing, taking a step back, okay, and noticing what's happening. Okay, what is the source of happiness and fulfillment in my life? What am I doing well at? Where do I feel some friction? Okay, where do I feel some tension? What's giving me tension? And if you notice that, and you can, back to the earlier remark about having clarity and focus, right? So it's noticing your bodily sensations, noticing the constriction of your muscles, the tightening. Okay, what is pulling you out of a relaxed state? There's normal stress, and then there's recurring stress, right? So understanding the source of recurring stress is something that helps you notice where things are out of balance. And in this case, maybe it's a relationship. The good news is with all of these sources of imbalance, there's pathways and there's practical steps, easy practical steps to put things back in balance. And here at Meditation Live, we're lucky to be able to do that together and help one another along the way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eric. And thank you to everyone who commented, asked questions, participated today. What a great discussion. So Dr. Eric, I'm going to hand it over to you. I don't see that we have any more questions or comments. So if there's anything that you would like to finish up with, I think that we're about ready to wrap up for today. Again, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for participating, everyone. I'm going to close off on the Miles Make Champions quote and slogan, and encourage you to continue to do the work to develop the habits to reach your peak performance. Thanks for joining today.